Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And now it's your turn to share your stories. Today, I have an incredible guest with me. Her name is Parul Dua Makkar. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Maya, for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here with me today because we're going to bring awareness to a topic that we have not covered on the show yet. We have talked about cancer and losing a sibling to cancer before, but we've never discussed this type of cancer. And this is a true, passion for you in what you do and your work and your sweet brother, Manu, that you lost. So you lost your brother in 2021, but take us back a little bit further and tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your family dynamics. I'm curious about that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. And,
Yeah.
there are very few people that actually associate and realize what a sibling loss and how monumental it can be. So, Manu was my younger and only sibling. We're almost 8 years apart. And so, I've changed his diapers. I saw him come into the world and eventually leave the world. And it changed like everything about me, my identity. But growing up, he was a quiet kid, very observant. But as he grew into his self, into his own, he was witty. Like he'll send these little quirk remarks, and it's hilarious. And he'll be just like he'll make a small comment, and everything for him was black or white. He never like had any gray areas. He was always like, "This is the way. This is how it should be." And if you were his friend, he was your friend to death. Like he would do anything for you as a friend. He was a loyal person, great in sports. He played in rugby. He played golf. You couldn't beat him on the squash court, badminton. I mean, he was just full of life. Loved to dance. Um, yeah, he just never. He was a fighter, and he fought for everything that he got. So, and he fought all about cancer too. He was my only sibling, and we grew up in different parts of the world. I am actually born in India, but we moved to the Middle East when I was about 5 or 6, and he was born in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi. And he came to Canada in his early teens while I was going to dental school and undergrad in U.S. And so we kind of grew in different settings with different set of parents, but we always dentistry was something that bonded us. He had followed my footsteps into the field of dentistry, and that's kind of what united us because even though we were so far apart, we were different genders, we had different friends, um, and different upbringing, but we would take courses together, talk about setting up practices, and that's what brought us closer together. um, but yeah, he was my only sibling, and I call myself a global nomad, and that's kind of where when I lost him, I didn't have this village of grief protecting me, from it. I didn't have my people that I grew up with, your close family friends, your childhood friends. I didn't have my parents close to me. I didn't have my cousins or anybody. So it's a very challenging time in the midst of COVID that it all happened.
So I think it's interesting that you and your brother didn't necessarily grow up around each other, but then ended up both in the dentistry field. So how did that happen?
I think I became a dentist, and when I graduated dental school, he graduated high school, and I was home. He watched me practice, and he's like, you know what, this seems pretty okay. I'll join you, and that's how it happened. Yeah.
Typical younger sibling following in your footsteps, right? I relate to you too because I'm the oldest, so I relate to that for sure. I think that's really, really sweet. Yeah, I think that's really cool. So how did your relationship work if you guys were so far apart? Like, did you guys visit each other? What were the dynamics? Like, how did you build on that relationship? And it's a really special relationship too when you're the if that's your only sibling, right? There can be a lot of pressure on that relationship too. So how did that work? What was that dynamic like?
So because it was just the two of us, we were always together. We were close knit as a family, my parents, and because we moved so many different places, we didn't have like this certain group always hanging out with our cousins. So it's just always the four of us. And, I visited. He would come here. We would take courses together. He did one externship in New York. So he came and stayed with me. You know, uh, I'm still in touch with all his friends, his closest network of friends. We just became part of each other's lives. And we tried to maintain that as best as we could.
Okay, so yeah, so the four of you did when you saw each other, you were the dynamic was quite close, right? Because
Correct.
this was your only sibling. And so
And my parents,
um
yeah.
and again, I love how he was inspired to go to school and kind of follow in your footsteps. So talk us through a little bit like what that was like. Like what was it like when he went to school and then you started your career obviously? Did you guys live near each other in at any time or were you always separate but close?
Separate but close. The only time, growing up, yes, we were together. And then I left for college. I was 17, he was 10. Then we reconnected when I graduated it. So he was, 17, then I was 24. And then we were together for those 3 years and then apart again. So our basic connection was through, we never lived in the same city more than, that allotted time. But, we would talk every other day. I talked to my parents every day. Um, I was the first person he told when he had cancer. He's like, I'm telling you, let me tell my parents on my own time. And I said, okay, you take your time. So, there were some things he would tell me first before he told my parents, so our parents. Yeah.
Well, and with that age gap, right? You're kind of a second parent in a lot of
Oh my
ways,
God. Yeah. Second
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah, you're so protective and I'm the oldest too, so I connect with that and I think it's really special when your younger siblings like look up to you and really trust you with that information. So let's go to that time. Let's talk about that. So you guys are both in your profession, you're rocking and rolling, living life, and he gets diagnosed with oral cancer. Walk us through what that was like and when that happened. And obviously, you shared with us just a few moments ago that he entrusted you with this information. So take us to that time period and how this all got diagnosed, how this happened.
Sure. So that was pre COVID in 2019. He was just, he showed me the lesion in June, just before his 33rd birthday. And I flew to Calgary like I always do. He had just bought a new home, he had a startup practice. He was really, like you said, rocking and rolling. Like he had this startup and high on life and bought a new home. And, he was invincible. And when I saw the lesion, I'm like, I got this checked out by other people. I think this is cancer. And he's like, no, I can't have cancer. This hurts. Cancer doesn't hurt. Little misconceptions. And I think when you're in your 30s, cancer is like so far in you're not thinking that. And he was healthy. No, like, not a smoker or tobacco use or anything. So he played it off and he was under the care of physicians that delayed the biopsy because again, cancer is just not on the radar. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed after I visited him in July of 2019. And he got diagnosed and he had a 8-hour surgery where he had to remove the lesion. And I remember my dad calling me up and saying, hey, Manu got diagnosed with cancer. Is he going to die? And I said, no, Manu's going to be just fine because he's young. They're just going to take it out. He's going to get radiation, chemo. It's going to be great. And he did very well for himself. He had the surgery in August where half his tongue was removed and grafted and a dissection and all of that so well that he was seeing patients in October and he visited me in New York in September.
Get out of here. Are you
He flew.
serious?
And
Wow.
Calgary to New York's not a short flight. It's like a 7 hour.
No.
It's the other it's across the continent. So he did. He flew. And he was so excited. He went shopping, brought all these clothes. He's like, I'm going to dress. Like he got a new zest for life. And he's like, I'm going to do what I want. And he bought himself a Porsche after his treatment. He's like,
Good for
why am I
him.
going to win? Exactly. Why am I going to? At this point, he was still like so positive that he's going to beat this, that it was his first surgery. And he's like, yeah, I've beaten cancer. I'm going to go conquer the world now. I'm going to go get my Porsche. He got a dog whose name, he loved this dog. And he wrote a whole chapter about this dog. And his dog's name was Maya. And
Oh,
Maya means illusion, illusion, wealth, like this, in our language. It's a beautiful meaning.
I am very familiar. And yes, I'm very, very familiar. And because what is your background?
Indian.
Yeah,
You're from
that's
India.
what I
Yeah.
thought. That's what I thought.
Okay.
Yeah, and my father used to travel there, and he
Got it.
worked with a lot of people in the culture. And I'm named Maya after Maya Angelou, but also my parents are European, and so it's a very European name too. But I remember my dad like really understanding the Indian, like the illusion, the wealth,
Yes.
the
Yes.
beauty of the name.
Beautiful
And so
name.
I've always felt very lucky in my family because I really love my name. So yeah,
It is a beautiful name.
yeah,
And so that's what he wanted this dog and he named her Maya. And yeah, so he started checking off those bucket list items, knowing that, he was confident he's going to beat this thing, right? Nobody's going to expect to.
yeah,
And unfortunately, in 2020, when the world was battling pandemic, borders between U.S. Canada, something that I had taken so for granted, right? Things you assume, especially siblings, your younger siblings going to outlive you. You're going to be able to travel between U.S. Canada freely. You can drive. It's landlocked. It's not like you have to take a boat. So things you assumed were no longer the reality. And but it came back. The cancer returned, and he had to get another surgery. Lesion was on his chest, wasn't biopsied in time. They left it because it was too small on the same side of his initial tongue lesion, and there was something on the lungs. And that's when he decided, in that summer of 2020, he decided to quit dentistry, sold his practice. He's like, I'm going to really live. Started kayaking, finding COVID friendly activities. And he celebrated his 34th birthday in the midst of COVID.
we hope you're enjoying this incredible episode of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. Dr. Parul Dua Makkar is a general dentist who lost her brother and only sibling, Dr. Manu Dua. She lost her brother Manu to oral cancer when he was only 34 years old. Now, Parul helps bring awareness to oral cancer and lectures on this topic. She also helps healthcare professionals navigate grief with her grief coaching services. Parul published the book Life Interrupted, Dr. Dua's Survival Guide by Dr. Manu Dua. These are a series of blogs that Manu wrote in his last days. Parul then helped complete this book and publish it in honor of her brother. If you're interested in learning more about Parul's services and this incredible book, visit doagoodjob.com. That's DUAGOODJOB.com.
Unfortunately, things got worse, and the lesion on his that was seen on the x-rays back in April of 2020 had grown by the December, and the cancer was deemed inoperable. The lesion was all over his lung lining, so they couldn't even remove part of his lung. And I was told that he doesn't have much time. And so I flew to see him without being vaccinated on this flight. And, it was a scary time. I know 5 years post COVID, but at that time I wasn't vaccinated. My parents were like, we're losing one child. We can't lose another child.
Yeah.
And I needed to see him. And I had to get a compassion release from the government of Canada. It has to be signed up by doctors. And there's a whole form. It's about 8 pages that has to be cleared, and it's only valid for a month. So it's not like you can come and back, because Canada is one of the strictest countries, and you had to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to being let out into the public. So everybody had to sign where you're quarantining. My dad's house, my brother's house. And my dad was so dead against it. He wouldn't even listen to me. He's like, "You're not coming. You have young kids. You have your practice. You have all these things. You're not coming." And because he was in non-medical, it was hard for me to tell my dad, like, "No, my brother's dying. I need to come see him." And so I actually wrote my dad a letter, an email, and saying that, I understand what you're coming from, but this is my only sibling. I haven't been there for any of the surgeries. I know it's COVID. I understand that. Let me come. Allow me. And that's when he signed off because he wasn't ready to sign the paperwork. Like I had to write this long emotional email. If he wouldn't sign it, I wouldn't be able to travel.
Wow.
And so yeah, I flew, and you had to get the 3-day PCR testing. Like it was no joke. And I flew, and death was this elephant in the room. We just didn't want to, we chose to ignore it and dodge it. But he didn't talk, didn't walk. This kid who played rugby took the first footsteps, couldn't breathe, and because he had fluid buildup because of the lung lining,
Right.
um, and cancer had spread into his bones down to his pelvic bone. He would drain fluid from his port, and I didn't think that that was the last time I would see him. We still talked about a future. We're like, yes, you're going to beat this. Yes, what are you going to do? Try to be. And unfortunately, the way things panned out, he died very quickly. Nobody was ever ready for it.
So this visit was when again? It was late.
December of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
2020.
Okay. Late in 2020. Yeah. And I mean that was yeah, I mean the rapid tests and all of
Oh my!
that and
There was no rapid test allowed for Canada. You had to do 3-day PCR testing.
I that's what I heard. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And so it's you've got to take it and then you've got to wait and you've got to make sure you're quarantining because you don't want to
Yeah.
get it from anybody and
So, yeah, oh,
oh my
it was a
gosh.
mess, and this is why I missed him by a day because of the PCR. Because he went into. I was at work. I was supposed to travel a week prior, like March 20th, 21st. I had to reapply for the treatment because reapply for the compassion release. But in March, he was getting treated with immunotherapy and chemo radiation. He was getting another round of it. He's like, "Come see me after I'm done. Don't come in February. Don't come in Jan." And he was writing at this point. He had started writing his, feeling about life and what his life lessons were. And that was his only outlet. Friends were limited, treatment, protocols. It was just, COVID was still rapid. And, he's like, "Come in March." So I actually had my compassion release because he told me. Um, he went into the hospital. It was a daily occurrence. People who've had, who've had family members going cancer, there's always something or the other happening. So you're always in and out of the hospital. And it was very, like, yeah, Friday night, we're going to the hospital. Don't call Manu. He's being admitted. Very norm at this point. And the next day I was at work and my parents said he's being moved to hospice. And if you can, like, this is at late at night, they finally, there's a time delay and all of that. There's a 2 hour. And they said, he's not going to make it for the next week. You need to get on a plane right now. And so Sunday, I am struggling to get a PCR. Remember, it takes 3 days. My doctor
Yes.
could get it within hours. She, expedited it. And Canada, I was on the consulate. I'm like, I need to go. A Canadian citizen is dying. Nothing. They're like, you can't do rapid. You have to do 3-day PCR. We can't accept the rapid. And there's all these limited release forms that the day of his funeral, I was on with the Canadian consulate to get a limited release signed off by the funeral director and get it approved that yes, I can go to the funeral home.
Wow.
My husband and I. Like there were unprecedented times. Instead of planning and doing the funeral, which, my dad's like, I can't plan my son's funeral. I took care of, the casket and planning the eulogy
Mm.
and I'm like, oh no, I need to get these forms signed or I'll be jailed because Canada was checking on you every single day.
Yeah, they were not playing around.
They're
That's
not. No.
yeah, that's really intense.
So so on a Sunday, I finally did get, and I booked my flight for early morning Monday. And Sunday night, as his body was he was on a morphine drip, he was shutting. We were talking like on the Zoom call, like you and I are right now. And I told him, you can let go. Don't wait for me. Don't, I know you're hurting. Just stop hurting. You go. And within hours of that conversation, he was gone. He was no more. And so, so I knew going that I was planning a funeral, that this is it.
Isn't that flight so hard? Isn't that flight so hard when you're going somewhere and you know that you're not going to see them? I was just talking about this with some other folks, and you know, my heart goes out to you guys that have to get on a plane knowing that you're going to see a loved one that has passed.
And
That's
that
tough.
happened twice.
Yeah.
It happened with my dad
Yeah,
last November.
that's so tough.
This past November, I knew, they told me he is no longer. For your listeners, my dad had a cardiac arrest right after the Thanksgiving in November on a Thursday. He landed from India. Friday, he had a cardiac arrest. And I'm like, what's going on? And I get on the phone with the doctors. They're like, we're going to keep him on the ventilator and under observation, but it's not looking good. Come prepared. And so I was in a same 3 years later, the same scenario playing out in my head. I'm planning another funeral. And
And
I,
I'm sure that just brought everything back up for you too. It's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going through this
again,
again." That's a lot.
yes, it is. And I think I've worked, with my grief over the last 4 years, that I was able to handle my dad's. With my brothers, it was much harder. I did go through panic attacks and a lot of depression, anxiety, all of those things. But I worked so hard on myself to process and to make peace with it. And I think part of losing a parent is they're going to go, right? That's the nature, law of nature. Your parents
Yeah.
precede you. And he wasn't hurting anymore. My dad was not missing my brother anymore. He's with him. And, I tell when my brother died at his eulogy, and I was like, just like a typical younger brother. You left me to do all the work. I have to publish your book. I have to talk about oral cancer. I have to take care of the parents. I have to take care after your house. Blah blah blah. Like so typical. You just had
Yeah.
fun and off you go. you know.
Yeah.
And then my dad, when he passed and he was on the ventilator, and I got to he was not talking, obviously, he's on a ventilator, but I was like, I knew it. You loved him more, and this is why you're leaving me. You want to be with your son. You don't want to be with me. I get it. So, you
Yeah. Yeah, but we mentioned this before we hit record, and we were just catching up, but I want you guys to hear this too. Your father didn't have any heart problems, any heart issues.
no,
So this was a sudden loss for you as well. I totally understand and connect with you saying like my brother was more intense. I mean, he was 34. I mean, come on, he's a baby still,
yeah,
but and that was quite rapid what happened with him, but what I think is interesting is that your father didn't have any heart
no,
conditions or issues. So I think, and we connected on this, he died of a broken heart. I think it's a very real thing. And you were like, he absolutely did.
he
Yeah, he
did.
died of a broken heart.
He has been traveling his entire life. He traveled 6 continents. He took an international trip, came back. And the doctors are like, there was no clot. I mean, when my mom told me he's got a cardiac arrest, 3 times his heart stopped breathing, stopped working. And I'm like, Papa, cardiac arrest? Like it didn't correlate. Never had, diabetes, other stuff. But I'm like, no heart in the history in the family. And the doctor's like, he has no clots. He has no blockages in his heart. It's just stopped. And he was just so depressed that his heart stopped beating. Um, and it's still like to this day, I'm like, I don't understand. The doctors couldn't give us an answer either. He, so it was so quick. And he was actually, my dad was supposed to be traveling in a few weeks to come see me for the holidays for Christmas and New Year's.
Wow.
He had his flight booked. Like it was so out of the ordinary, Manu, I kind of made, we were expecting there's that anticipatory grief that it's coming. But with my dad, it was like an accident or like, it's just he was here today, gone tomorrow.
Right.
Like that.
You've experienced so many different aspects of grief in such a short period of time,
Yeah.
right? Between your father and Manu. And I
And
mean,
my
that's,
grandparents, I lost my only grandparents that I knew one in 2020 and one in 2021. So in 4 years,
You've
I
been through it.
lost, yeah, I lost, my mom lost her parents, her son, and her husband
Wow.
in 4 years. And
It's
I
a
have
lot.
this, it's a lot. And I have this picture when I was younger. And that really, like, really sank in. There's a picture by the beach in Abu Dhabi. My grandparents were visiting from India. And it's Manu. He must have been 7, 8, like a, young kid. My grandparents, my dad, and me. And I looked at that picture. I'm like, everybody but me is gone in this picture.
Wow, that's a moment.
That's a moment to sink in. I was like, wow, that made it, more like real.
Yeah.
Not that it isn't real, sometimes you're just going in that process of,
No, I connect with that, and I know you guys listening will connect with that too. There are moments on our grief journey where it like hits us, right? Like different things. Sometimes the depression hits us, sometimes the anxiety hits us, sometimes, different emotions and things hit us. And the feeling of it feeling very real, that was a moment for you.
that
You
was,
were like, and so that's a big thing that we talk about a lot on this show and the different things that we do, like our events and stuff as well. There are significant moments. There were in my journey as well when I was like, "Oh my god, like this is really real." And that's a powerful moment that you had looking at that picture.
yeah, you realize the fragility of life. And, you talk about that, but it's just like,
But when you experience it yourself and you have those moments, like you're never going to forget that moment and looking at that picture. I want to ask you something before we move forward a little bit more. What I thought was interesting about Manu's story and how he had this, lesion and sore in his mouth, and it was so fast. And you looked at it and you were like, you were like, I've done this for a while, brother. I think, I thought that was interesting in the story. But I also think what's interesting is a couple things, and I have a couple questions for you too. So he had the surgery, a very intense surgery, 8 hours. Oh my
yeah,
God. And then he thought he was going to be good and beat this. And then it sounds like it spread or it traveled, right? That's what happened with the lung, right?
because
Is
it was
that
in his nodes, so it traveled from the
wow?
nodes into the lungs. Because he had
Okay.
a node, that's why he had the neck dissection. He
Right.
had half his tongue removed, grafted, and then he had his neck dissection to remove the nodes from the neck, and that's how
So
cancer spreads. Yeah,
yeah. Okay. So I wanted to clarify that so everybody kind of understood what happened. And is that again, I'm learning so much about this particular type of cancer, which I know this is like your mission to spread awareness to this was just so important. So is this common to happen, for that to happen, to get diagnosed and then it spreads somewhere and then that's kind of what manifests with everything? Yes, it is. Okay.
yeah. So unfortunately, because there's no real test for oral cancer that's FDA approved, so like you get a Pap smear done, you get a mammogram done, you get a colonoscopy done. There is no such quite a test for it. And it's usually a visual, like, oh, you see a lesion, you get it biopsied. Unfortunately, of the cases that are diagnosed, 70% of the cases that are diagnosed of oral cancer in stages 3 and 4, and their survival rate is like below 50%. But if you catch it in the earlier stages 1 and 2, before it spreads into the nodes, the survival rate's over 80%. I know survivors we know cancer survivors. So the key to all of this is that early detection. And more and more cases are in the younger population that weren't the norm before. You would associate oral cancer with like a chain smoker, who's an alcoholic, and is, smoking pipe joints or whatever. But more that. But now there are more and more cases with the human papillomavirus, which is the HPV. That's what there's more awareness for it. And in the younger, for no rhyme or reason. Like Manu didn't have an answer. He's like, I had a 3% chance. It could be environmental. We don't have an answer, to be honest with you.
That was going to be my next question for you. So thank you for addressing that and talking about that. And yeah, and I was also going to ask why. So yeah, HPV is like a
Yeah.
reason. So like, I mean, gosh, I remember when I was young, like that was never really talked about, and now it's like talked about all the time. And so it's interesting the different things that are coming up. And I was going to ask you too, like what like why did this happen? And I think that's really difficult too in this journey of loss, right? When we can't pinpoint why? Like,
Went by
why did this happen? Do you feel like
environment.
that's been difficult for you? And you're in this industry, is that
This is my
difficult
mission.
for you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was very, and Manus wasn't HPV because that's more your throat cancers, like more in the posterior area.
right.
Manus was on the tongue, and it could be an environmental environment, pollution, all of those things make a difference. So yeah, to not have an answer why, and that's kind of sometimes with life, right? Why being, what could you have done? There's nothing you could have done different. Was it a genetic component because we lost a grandmother to cancer, not oral cancer, a different form of cancer? But is it a gene thing, right? Like we just have that mutation. So, and then there's a lot of guilt attached to it. Why him? Why not me? We have the same gene pool. Why him at a younger age when he was so healthy? What am I passing down to my children? If I have a grandmother and a brother, what am I passing down to my kids? What if I get it, because it's in my genetics? What's going to happen to my children? What could I have done to change the narrative? So, couldn't help my parents, couldn't help my Manu. So there's a lot of guilt attached. And so this is what I do. It's like I couldn't say Manu, and I cannot go back and change it. There is no sense in blaming, but I can change the future
Yeah.
and make a difference.
I love that. And I connect with that. And I
Yeah.
think that's amazing that you brought this up because it's a topic that all of you who are listening bring up all the time. Like, I'm going through so much guilt. I feel so much guilt. So thank you for being so raw and open about that and kind of explaining, how you felt with your brother and your family and your parents. And but now you can't change anything. We can't go back. And I think that's kind of a turning point for us when we're feeling the guilt and all of that, and then finding an outlet, which you've
Right.
done and I can connect with, because now I feel like, I'm like, okay, I had like a turning point a couple years in, and I was like, okay, I can't feel guilty anymore. I need to live for him and me. And I
Yes.
feel like so connected to your story because even though our losses are different, I feel you doing that. So tell us a little bit about the work you've done, because I know you finished and published his book. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that. Because you're out there, you're talking at different events. You're doing so much. I know we connected on social media, so I love watching your stuff when it pops up. But tell us a little bit about this journey. You
Yeah.
published his book.
So his book was something that he was working on while, because he had sold his practice. He was single. He didn't have kids. He didn't have an outlet. And in the midst of COVID. So that writing was his outlet. And he was such a gifted writer. And he talks about raw moments about, he's sitting on a hospital bed in nothing but a gown on. And all the accolades in the world couldn't help him as he lay alone watching the world that go, do their thing. And he was no longer allowed to participate in it anymore. And he talks from a point of peace. He had made peace with his journey. He was okay with dying. He was like, I'm not going to go without a fight. And so he kept writing. And he told me, I want to be published. So when I saw him in December, he showed me his writings, and he would share. And he was also writing for a dental town magazine. And that's a magazine for dentists. And why I bring that up is because he was featured on the cover story as for his practice that he did from start in Calgary. And he also talked about his cancer journey, like a shoemaker whose shoes broken. So he was very vocal and very forthcoming with his, cancer diagnosis. So it was his story. He started it, sharing about it. And that was his first time publicly. And then he started writing these blogs. And I found him a publisher, and I told him in February, I'm like, I got you a publisher, let's go. Because I wanted to see it in
Yeah.
his hand. Like I wanted him to see it. And he's like, no, I have time. I'm going to write more. I'm like, keep going. So I let him keep going. And then, I even told him, I'm like, do you feel like you're riding a car and, you enjoy cars and you enjoy the Porsche and you go out with your friends, but is that something that you feel in control of because you're behind the wheel, and life you don't have a control over because, you're not in the steering wheel? He's like, no, I've just learned my lessons. I don't care about the control anymore. It is what it is. And I've made peace with it. So when he died, I entered his house. Um, he died on a Sunday. I entered his house on a Tuesday, and in the mail was the Dental Town magazine, where he talked about his cancer journey. He wrote another article, which I put in the book, and it was about leaving dentistry this way out. You know, how cancer gave him a permission to leave dentistry where he didn't enjoy the profession for whatever reasons. And my mom looked at that and she's like, well, he found his way out of life, even. And I walked in and there was everything there, you know, his blanket, his unfinished Lego, dirty dishes from Friday night, food in the, you know, he was so particular. Like he never ate chocolate. He loved food. He was such a foodie. And he would save all his candy and chocolate. He's like after cancer because he was so particular not eating sugar during his cancer treatment. So everything was there. And then his medication, but the sun rose, you know, life is continuing and you feel like everything stopped and you want the world to just stop for a second so you can even process the reality of what you have. And that's why the book's title came Life Interrupted. And he called it his Doctor Do a Survival Guide. And, you know, I sat down, opened up his laptop, and, you know, he says, I don't have to have anybody read this. I'm perfectly fine. My soul is at peace. But I'm like, no, this needs to be shared with the world. He had so much wisdom in there as his young age. He was an old soul. He was young in human years, but an older soul. And I'm like, no, this is the world needs to see this. And then I wrote the epilogue, which was my perspective that he was more than the cancer that took him and how he became who he became. And that's where the book came from. So yeah, and you know, it's done pretty okay. And yeah, I share it. I share it with everyone in the world.
Yeah, yeah, and you guys can grab it in the show notes here too, and it's on our website. And I think that's so beautiful because you were encouraging him to write and supporting him, and then you use that same publisher to publish? Is that who you?
Yep,
Yeah,
because he died in March, and I had this book published in print in August. Like it was,
go get her, woman after my own heart over here. Yeah,
and it was a closure. Right now, I have something tangible. It's actually right here. It's like this. We created this together. It's physical. You know, I don't have other family. This is it. You know, my parents go, and then you. That's it. That's all I got. And so I don't have his kids to look at and you know remember him with. It's this book. It's his words. That was his legacy,
yeah.
and we created something together that we couldn't. You know, he's not going to plan. We're not going to plan big monumental. You know, parents' 50th or birthdays or weddings. We're not going to have any of that. This is it.
But I think, and for those of you who are just listening instead of watching, I love the cover too. By the way, I so like my brother. I don't know if you've noticed on my cover art, but like it's trees
Yes.
as well, and like your cover has trees and mountains, and like my brother and I are both very earthy, and so I just connect with that. So when I saw your book and we started talking about you coming on the show, and you know we put our book on the site and stuff that you guys of course can order. I was just like, I love this. I so connect with this. It's I
There's a
love
story
that.
there too.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's from Jasper, the Banff National Park, because
Yeah,
that's where he used to kayak.
I
And
love
so
it.
I wanted, and then that's where he felt at peace, you know, with nature, with being by the water. Yeah.
I love how there's so much depth in everything that you've done with him and the book, and I totally get what you're saying. Like I relate to you so much because, you know, my brother never got married, never had kids. So for me doing this work and doing the show, my brother was I'm pretty extroverted. So imagine someone even more extroverted. It's hard to imagine, but he was. And so that I feel like I've done this for him and I do this for him. And um, it's important. It's very fulfilling. Very fulfilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, because then you don't feel that their loss was in vain. You know, it's
Yeah.
not, there's a purpose. And I think having that purpose, you know, connecting with people and giving them some sort of connectedness and not making them feel alone in their journey has so much value.
Yeah.
that it keeps going. It keeps you, coming for the new day. Otherwise, life can be pretty down.
Yeah. No, I agree. I love everything that you've done. I'm curious too cuz I know again you have the book that he wrote and you finished, and I love that. Talk to us a little bit about what we should be aware of though, because this is not, again, something we've talked about on the show before, oral cancer. So what are things that we should be doing to be aware of this? And I mean, we've talked about different things that can potentially cause it, and but I think it's good to talk about the awareness too, because that's such a passion of yours as well.
Yes. So awareness, I, served as the American Dental Association's wellness ambassador, got featured, internationally. Um, and I actually spoke as a keynote for the first ADA's first oral cancer summit. And it's just,
Congratulations. That's so exciting to
it
bring
is.
awareness to this. Yeah.
And it's just telling people, because people are like, you can die from, tongue cancer or oral cancer. And it's just bringing that awareness, just like you would do a breast exam at home and you're looking for lumps, check your mouth. Like, whether it's painful or not, for anything that's non healing, maybe you bit your tongue, or maybe you brushed too hard in your gut, or you got a sore in your mouth, or something. It should heal within 2 weeks. And if it doesn't, whether it hurts or not, you know, go into the dentist and get it evaluated and get a biopsy, because the quicker the biopsy, the quicker and more conservative the treatment. Even if you have braces in your mouth, or you got a new appliance and it's rubbing against your cheek or your tongue, you can get that adjusted. If the lesion goes away, great. If not, we got to check, because yes, the biopsy is invasive and it hurts, and maybe a day off from work or whatever, but what's the price of that versus a price of life, right? Like, you find out earlier is better. And just visiting your dentist, don't wait till it hurts, because just like a cavity doesn't hurt until it's gotten bigger and it's into the nerve chamber in the center of the tooth, just like that, you're not aware unless you get it checked out. So some areas are kind of hard to see, like the back of your throat. You may not be like looking underneath your tongue, but like the floor of the mouth underneath your tongue, the on the sides of your tongue, those are kind of like the more prominent areas. Of course, certain habits like smoking, vaping, that's a big one, especially in the young population. I
Right.
have I have teenage boys, and trust me, there's vaping going on in high school and middle schools in the bathrooms. So that's a big proponent. Or people who are chewing tobacco or putting, smokeless tobacco in their um, all these are risk factors combined with alcohol, HPV, get the vaccine, vaccinate your kids. And so these are ways you can protect yourself if you're out in the sun a lot, like you love to garden, or you're a construction worker, or, you are a golfer, whatever. Or you're out in extended periods of time, just like you would put sunscreen, put lip balm to protect your lips from skin cancer and from oral cancer on the lips. So there's a lot you can do as preventative forms, and then just, going in for your regular checkups, and be like aware of your body, and tell your doctor, like, yeah, I'm having like a node, like I feel like a lump, but it's only on one side. Anything unilateral, right? So something like you got a cold, you might feel like your lymph nodes are inflamed and you feel like your sore throat. But if something persistent over time, especially on one side, like if you stick your tongue out in the mirror, you should be straight like that. But if it deviates only to one side and you're like, oh, my ear hurts too, these are some warning signs that you got to get checked out.
If
So,
something doesn't feel right, it's probably not,
no,
right?
it's
That's
probably not.
kind
Your
of the
body.
vibe there. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all of that with us, because again, I want to bring awareness to this, and I think it's, the more we know, the more we know, right? And I think that's important, but like um this is something that, when you were explaining earlier, like it gets caught really late. And so when you're going to the dentist, the expert here should know this, of course. Um, will they would they notice it right away? Like if you were to, okay, so if you're getting regular checkups
Yeah,
too, like you're in good shape, right? It's
yeah,
really when we start to
yeah,
not have people look at us, do our regular cleanings, be aware of what's potentially
yeah.
not feeling right. So just being aware is important. Yeah.
Yeah. And we live in the world of technology. I have intraoral cameras. I take pictures and I show it up on the computer. I'm like, look, this is what I see. And let's have you come back in 2 weeks. If it goes away, wonderful. If it doesn't go away and it goes, now it's become bigger or whatever, okay, you see it, now it's gone worse. Let's get you in.
Yeah.
So yeah, just talk to your doctor. And
And that 2 week, I think that's a great thing for people to know too. 2 weeks, if something hurts in your mouth or if you feel something and it's still there 2 weeks, like that's good too, because I think a lot of people, some people just ignore and then some people really freak out, like we have different
give it
personality
a couple of
types.
weeks, it should go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about some of the other stuff you're doing because you were talking to us about, I mean, congratulations on keynoting. That's so cool. I think I saw that as well. But yeah, talk to us a little bit because I know you have some coaching stuff, some other things going on in your website that, of course, we're going to put in the show notes here. And you can find it on our website right now as well, thesurvivingsiblings.com. But tell us a little bit about what you're up to because it's not just the book, it's not just speaking, but you're also doing some other stuff. So tell us about that.
So one of the things is talking about oral cancer in the sense of educating healthcare providers so people can join in, because oral cancer goes beyond just getting diagnosed. It changes the way you look, way you talk, way you eat, your nutrition changes. These patients have a lot of PTSD because the way they greet the world is now altered. The parts of their face are missing or they don't have teeth anymore. So, discussing giving that oral systemic link, like how medically and medical professionals don't spend a lot of time learning about the mouth. It's kind of separate. And unfortunately, it's one and the same thing. Whatever we put, our diet is important, and how, having good oral health is important for our guts and it's important for our heart, it's important for dementia. Like it's associated with all of these. If you're trying to get pregnant, you need to have a good oral health and you can spread cavities. So talking about oral cancer, giving that full dimensional look, and that's called my course online. And the other aspect, as I was dealing through grief as a healthcare provider, I took off time with Manu's. I actually took off 3 weeks from work, 2 weeks plan the funeral. 1 week I had to mandatory quarantine back in New York. And with my dad recently, he passed so suddenly. I had a full load of patients. I flew, on a Friday, not knowing what's happening, and my dad passed, and I'm having to plan a funeral. I took a whole week off, and then to fly back and see patients, the next day.
Back to
Like
life. That's
back
so
to life.
tough.
Life keeps going,
Hmm.
and so. And it's like the analogy of we're like tow trucks, right? We're helping. We're as healthcare professionals. We put our needs aside to take care of your patient, right? We do so much. And then who tows the tow truck if that's broken, right? So if you're feeling empty with grief and empty, like, oh my God, this tragedy happened, and here's a patient complaining about, oh, my bites, this is, oh, I have and, to be relative, yes, the toothache it hurts and it's not comfortable and it may be, but you're losing a whole life here and you're dealing with that and your dynamics has changed. So how do you show up for people and not lose yourself, not being empty inside? And you really can't pour out of an empty cup. It's, you just have to be um, in the right mind. And dentistry is such a lonely profession. We practice in our own little bubble,
Yeah.
so there's a higher suicide rate as it is. It's a very demanding profession. We're dealing with small spaces. We have the tongue, cheek in the way, patient can move. And we're dealing with very, very millimeters of. And so to be in this profession and channeling grief, I found it even more isolating. And so I started grief coaching for healthcare professionals as just a person to walk alongside that don't feel isolated. Grief shouldn't be, and you know this so well, grief isn't a journey to be traveled alone. And you regress back sometimes in those elements of grief. I always say I bear the unseen scars of cancer and how cancer affects the whole family, and my family's a living testament of it. And it really strips you from a lot of what future you imagine to what actually transpired, and how do you make sense of it. And so that's my journey of grief that I share with others, and I talk about it and I coach people to help as a healthcare professional.
I think that's wonderful. I knew you were doing that, but I wanted you to share about it. But I think that's really wonderful, and I love when people find like a niche as well, because I think you can relate so well to other healthcare providers and meet them wherever they're at in their journey. And you've experienced, it must be so intense to be a dentist in this industry and losing your brother to oral cancer. I mean, it's like so intense, right? Like just going through that. And then you've also lost your, father very suddenly. So there's just so many aspects of your grief journey that I know you have. I mean, just in this episode, you shared so much insight, but I'm sure as you're doing grief coaching for these folks and you're really connecting with them, and you're right, we don't want to walk this alone, and there's a lot of great resources out here. And I love that message, because I think when I was walking the grief journey alone, it was horrible, and it's horrible in general. But when I started to find other people
Mm.
like you and like all the great people that come on the show or come to our group or our events and things like that, things really shifted for me. So I think it's really amazing what you're doing, because we just want to know we're not alone on this journey.
Yes. Yes, and you're right. You felt alone, and because again, sibling loss, I don't think is something that is talked about. And my parents had accumulative, joint loss of a son, and they got each other. And I'm like, what do I talk to? I don't even have, even
You're
if you
like,
have,
hi, I'm here too. Yeah.
kind. So, and who do you like? You watch your like I watch my husband interact with his sibling, and I see nieces and nephews, and I'm like, my one of my friends, I remember she told me how her sister is pregnant, and I started crying, and she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, I'm happy for you that you get to experience this, but it just, it's one of those things, that moment where you're like, this will never happen for me. And even though I was entitled to it, right? It was my birthright. I had a brother. This
Yes.
was my journey. I was supposed to be an aunt. And, my kids will say, like, we don't have any more cousins that are younger than us, and I had those things to give to them and I couldn't. And so, you have these little things. And even though, and this, even though you may have many siblings, the relationship between siblings is very different.
Oh, yes.
You know
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So, and so it's not like, oh, yeah, you lost the same brother. Your grief is very different because your relationship was different. And it's
Yep.
the same with parents, and it's the same with grandparents. It's a different, and to be validated and to be seen and heard. And I think that's what people, and that's, you've created this community, is people seen people feel seen and heard and validated, that yes, what they went through is big and it matters.
It is big and it does matter.
Yeah,
And I'm so grateful for you coming on the show, supporting the show, and
thank you.
sharing all of this with us. I feel like I learned so much. I love episodes where I feel like I learned a whole lot. So thanks for sharing that with us. Talk to us about where we can connect with you. Obviously, it's going to be in the show notes as well, but tell us where you are on social media, your website, all that good stuff, and it'll be in the show notes for you guys too.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Parul Dua Makkar, or the website Do a Good Job, DUA. That's a pun of my maiden
I
name.
love that, by the way. I think it's so cute. Yeah.
Manu gets the credit for it, but he coined it.
So cute.
Um, so I'll always give him the credit. Even the book, like when I was publishing it, and when I was printing it, and I told my husband, I'm like, should I put my name in the front? He's like, no, you didn't write it. I'm like, true. So I never put his name in the front. It's on the inside cover when I write it. But yes, so the website, Dua, DUA, good job. And same thing on Instagram at Dua, good job. Yeah.
I love that. That's so cute. And then, of course, we'll have the link to your book and your brother's book, I should say, and also to connect with you directly. Thank you so much for being here, Parul. I appreciate you and sharing so openly and honestly with us. I think it's been really wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.